all those years ago, I never thought anybody would ask me for my autograph. Isn't it unbelievable? Just incredible. So, I stayed till midnight and signed my name, right? Because I never dreamed it was going to happen, but sure enough, it did. Autographs and Girl Scout cookies. I mean, I'm in the market. I really appreciate it. Everybody doing okay? Say, I'm okay. Does anybody have 5 pages of notes already? Okay, I'm sure you're filling up your book. I appreciate that. Okay, we've got a couple of more subjects now to get through, and we got just about 55 minutes to do it. So let's get started. First, let's talk about my version of financial independence. You've heard from Brian. You've heard, some excellent advice. Dennis, these guys are long time experienced, and I'm sure you've got good notes on their presentation. This little bit I, designed long time ago. It's still valid today. Here's one of the major goals to go for: financial independence. Every American's, right, privilege to become financially independent. So here's my definition of financial independence. The ability to live, and I'll give you time to write it down. The ability to live from the income of your personally invested resources. The ability to live from the income of your personally invested resources. That's the simple definition. That from the resources you've invested, the income from those resources, you could live. Here's one of the advantages of financial independence. Now you can work or not work. Or you can certainly choose the work to do. Now you can work by choice, not by necessity. And here's one of the best: to be able to work for joy and not for necessity. At first, of course, we have to work for necessity. But if you can finally reach the point where you can work for joy, not for necessity. That happened for me all those years ago. My father kept talking about financial independence, debt-free, no one having a claim on your assets, finally being able to live from the income of your invested resources. I remember the joyful day when that finally arrived. So what I've done now, most of my life, I've had the unique privilege of working for joy, not for necessity. Not that the joy doesn't bring you more income. Not that working for joy doesn't make you another fortune. It certainly has for me, right? Another fortune and another fortune and another fortune. But not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I work now for joy and not for necessity. Key phrase to understand. We should teach this to our children. Economics is major. Everyone has to major in economics. Number one, for personal survival. To produce enough to take care of yourself. The first, economics. The next good phrase on economics: it's not what you earn, it's what you do with what you earn that makes the great difference in your financial future. All of this is determined by your own philosophy. It's important early, and kids have to have a personal philosophy working even when they go to school. Here's a good definition of your personal philosophy: a guidance system. Your personal philosophy is a guidance system. And it does simply two things. Helps you to see the opportunities, take advantage of those. Helps you to see the dangers, minimize those. And as we learn and grow, we learn, hopefully, early to spot the dangers so they don't overcome us. Hopefully we learn early to see the opportunities and take advantage of those, maximize them if we can. That guidance system is like a sail on a sailboat. The winds are always blowing, favorable winds, unfavorable winds, stormy winds, economic winds, political winds. The wind is always blowing. But to arrive at a predetermined destination, it is not just the blowing of the wind that we have to deal with. Here's the major part, the set of the sail. The set of the sail is what you learn, gathering information from these 3 days. Talking to each other, gathering more information, filling up one journal, then another one. Information. Guidance on how to trim the sail, set the sail. The Sunday morning sermon, the lyrics of a song, the dialogue of the movie. Words put into good structure so that they deliver enlightenment, information, knowledge. And we use that to set sail. And it isn't that you set sail once and then that's it and it's over. It is a continual setting of sail every day, every month, every year. Setting sail economically, trimming the sail. For your good health, you just have to set sail toward the destination you wish to reach, having good health. Then it's easy to neglect. Then it's easy to slide. Here's one of the better phrases. Everything by longevity tends to get off course. Everything by longevity tends to get off course. When the early astronauts made those trips to the moon, on the way to the moon, here's what they had to engage in: mid-course corrections. They look at all the gauges, and some solar winds that they didn't expect has pushed them off course as they look at the gauges. Now they must fire the little rockets to get the spaceship back on course. And it's especially critical if you're headed for the moon. If you're in an airplane and you miss Los Angeles and, make San Francisco, you're okay. But you can't miss the moon. And here's why. If you miss the moon, you can't get back. So just put this little note now. It's a pretty serious note. Some destinations are critical. Speaking of going to the moon, we just celebrated that, right? Neil Armstrong and the others. I met Neil Armstrong one time, a little talk he gave. Neil Armstrong, here's what he said in his little talk. Going to the moon was just a matter of solving a couple of problems. I thought, that's a simple way to put it. Problem number one, how to get there. And then you just figure that out, how to get there. Problem number two, what? How to get back. That's problem number two, and you just solve that. Now, he said, it's also critical not to leave until you've solved both problems. I thought that was classic. Wow, speeches and information give us so much to chew on, right? Because you know what I did in some of my enterprises? I figured out how to get in. I didn't figure out how to get out. And some cost me more than I wanted to pay. Just because I, too quickly figured how to get in, did not figure how to get out. Whether it's a lecture like we've engaged in here, hours and hours and hours, or whether it's a simple sermon, one of the most classic sermons I ever heard originated not far from here in the Crystal Cathedral. I used to do little speeches for the positive thinkers breakfast meetings at the Crystal Cathedral, before it was the Crystal Cathedral. Little sessions they had in the morning, right, where you could attend and hear some speakers. I used to do some of those speeches, I don't know, 35 years ago, a long time ago. Possibility Thinkers Breakfast is what it was. His son, Sugar Jr., was giving a classic sermon one morning, and I was privileged to hear it. Here was the notes on his sermon. It's very brief, so I'll give it to you. So jot this down. These are great notes. Here was his sermon. Number one, if you think it's impossible, it isn't. That's number one. If you think it's impossible, it isn't. Here was point number two. If you think you know everything, you don't. Wow, that's good. Point number three. If you think you're alone, you're not. Isn't that a classic? That's a classic sermon. If you think it's impossible, it isn't. If you think you know everything, you don't. And if you think you're alone, you're not. Now, here was one of the spectacular stories in this little sermon. He told the story of Rich DeVos, who started the big Amway Corporation. Rich DeVos is in bad shape. Rich needs a heart transplant. And if he doesn't get it, he's not going to last very long. Now, fast forward. Rich DeVos finally gets his heart transplant. And what was spectacular about the story was, after his heart transplant, he has dinner with the lady who gave him her heart. He has dinner with the lady who gave him her heart. You say what? That's impossible. You couldn't have dinner with the person that gave you their heart. Here's what happened. This lady was desperately ill and needed a lung transplant. A donor was found, and sometimes it's much better in a lung transplant if the heart and the lung go together. So this lady gets the heart and the lung transplant that she needs to save her life. Now her heart is left over from this operation, and her heart goes to Rich DeVos. That's how Rich was able to have dinner with the lady who gave him her heart. Isn't that a fantastic story? I love those simple little stories. 1, 2, 3. A couple of illustrations. Wow. Just dramatic, dynamic. Anyway, where was I before I got off on these stories? Your philosophy. Whether it's your philosophy about economics or your philosophy about marriage or your guidance system about good health, it's easy to get off track. So by longevity, we start, and sure enough, it drifts off course. And that's what sermons are for. And that's what the lyrics of the songs are for, and personal conversation, is to get us what? Back on track. Back on track. And hopefully we're not too far off track so that it doesn't take too long to get back on track. So maybe that's all you needed this weekend. You're doing pretty good, but in a few things you've drifted a little to the right, or you've drifted a little to the left, or just by, a casual approach to some things instead of the serious approach, you're a little bit off track. And it doesn't take that long, if it hasn't gone on too long, to get back on track, back on track. But even if it's been a long time, you could start the process overnight. You can start the process. Decision-making this weekend could be some of the most important of your life and your future. Not because we have given the seminars, but because the moment was right for you. and somehow it was said okay, and somehow it was delivered with sincerity, and you got the message, and this weekend makes a pivotal turn for you in terms of the set of the sail. Okay, your philosophy. Now, your philosophy about money. Someone mentioned the other day the love of money. What about money? What about success? It's a good debate. I've got a good question, and it's not necessarily a high moral question, but it's a pretty good question. If you could do better, should you? That's not a bad question. Now, all of us have personal choice, but this is a good question, and a lot of my stuff is up for debate. You know, I don't even claim to be right. If you take all these notes and throw them away and go listen to somebody else, I'll be just as happy. Because, you know, it doesn't matter. As long as you finally, right, get the ideas that make a difference for you and add to the wealth and the structure of your own life systems. That's what's important. Not that I deliver the message that's all important. But piece by piece and speaker by speaker and teacher by teacher and phrase by phrase and book by book, we pick up the information that helps us to fine-tune our life and our future. But this is a good one for your own debate. If you could do better, should you? That's a good one. Now, let's talk about financial independence. When I meet Mr. Schoaf, I'm not in good shape. Here's where I was when I met him. Pennies in my pocket and nothing in the bank. Because the story of the Girl Scout with the cookies had just occurred in my life, and now I meet this man. Here's what he said. Now, to get started in a whole new direction, here's what you need to do. You need to develop a financial statement. So just make a little note on your notes there. If you haven't ever done it, this is not a bad place to start. A financial statement. And a financial statement is very simple. It's a piece of paper with a line down the middle. On this side is the value of all your assets, and over here is all of your liabilities. Here's what you've got in terms of worth, and here's what you owe. And then when you add up all of the value of your assets and you add up all that you owe, called liabilities, we come up with what we call now, finally, when you subtract one from the other, your current net worth. Now, this is not your net worth as a father. This is not your net worth as a parent. This is not your net worth as a friend. There's all kinds of worth and value. But if you really want your economics to go better, here's a good place to start. Key phrase, take a picture of where you are. And here's what it's called, the truth. Now, you don't have to publish this in some local newspaper, right? This is all private stuff. But you have to say, you know, finally, there's no use kidding myself. I got to take a picture of where I am. I got to know how good it is, or I got to know what? I got to know how bad it is. I got to know how much I'm on the upside, or how deep a hole am I really in. So this is what I started. It was a simple little program of coming up with my current net worth. My liabilities, that was easy. I owed my parents, I owed. I made the third borrowing on my car, and he was threatening to come and get it, drag it down the road, rear end up in front of my neighbors. So I had plenty of liabilities. On the asset side, I put my furniture even. I put everything I could think of. My shoes. I mean, wouldn't the Salvation Army give me $2 for my shoes? I mean, I am scrambling. And when I did this exercise, guess what it did? It really soberly gave me a current picture of where I was. And guess what? I was unhappy. But here's what's important about the truth. It sets you free. Number one, free to correct old errors in judgment. That's what the truth is for. To correct old errors. After 6 years, I started working when I was 19. And when I took a picture of where I was, it was not a very happy experience. So now, where do we go from here? In putting together a financial statement, realizing exactly where we are. No nonsense. This is the real deal. We don't have to share it with anybody, but we do need to know the truth for ourselves. Now here's what we need. Number one, perhaps a new philosophy. Let me give you sort of the simple philosophy of the rich and the poor. Here's the philosophy usually of the rich and the poor. Poor people spend their money and invest what's left. Brian talked a little bit about that, and there's usually what? Not much left. Here's usually the philosophy of the rich. The rich invest their money and spend what's left. It's just a little turn of semantics. But the little turn of semantics is like the turn of the set of the sail that takes you in a whole different direction to wind up at a good place in 1 year, or a place, of average, mundane, where you don't really want to be. Just that little simple shift of philosophy. So here's the key. Think like the rich. Invest your money first, then spend what's left. Don't spend your money and invest what's left. Now the whole key is lifestyle, and Brian touched a little bit on that. When I gave this little class one time at a school class, the teacher said, you must not, promise people that with a little bit of investment every month that they can, make their fortune, because people nowadays are overloaded. They're spending everything they make. Their standard of living is right up there. And I said, well, this is where it all begins. I said, could we think of someone, and this was a long time ago, of course, that makes $2,000 a month? She said, yes, no problem. We can probably find someone that makes $2,000 a month. What would this couple, this family tell you it takes to pay all the bills and just keep their head above water? And she said, well, $2,000. I said, could we possibly find somebody not far from here that makes $2,500 a month, right? Maybe even both working combined. $2,500 a month, $500 a month more. What would this family say it probably takes to pay all the bills and keep your head above water? What would they say, right? $2,500. So I said to her, what happened to this $500? How did it disappear? Wisely invested over some reasonable period of time, the return is unbelievable. And she said, I never thought about that. So jot this down. The money is always there, either to spend or invest. The difference in what you do with it is based on philosophy, not economy. It isn't the state of America's economy that makes the difference. It's the difference in your philosophy. Right? That illustration? Here's a book on how to get rich. It costs $20. Somebody says, well, a poor person can't buy that book. I say, no, it's only 7 Coca-Colas. And you either spend the money on 7 Coca-Colas or a $20 book that teaches how to get rich. So jot this down. Everybody has the money. Even the poorest of the poor. The key is how to spend it. The key is what to spend it for. And how you spend it. First, how you earn it is determined by your philosophy. Second, now, how you spend it is determined also by your personal philosophy. So what would be a good philosophy to follow? And this is the little simple form I want to give you on financial independence, wealth for the future. It won't take long now to jot this down. It takes a little longer to go do it, but here it is. What to do with $1? If a child asks what to do with $1, here's my suggestion. Never spend more than 70 cents. 70 cents. You've got to pick some number, right? This is the number I've picked, right? Listen to Brian, listen to Dennis, listen to me, and then refine your own to suit you. But I suggest don't spend more than 70 cents. Here's where the other 30 cents goes. 10 cents, 10% of your income for charity, church, whatever, supporting worthy projects, teaching children here to become generous. If kids understand generosity, they'll give you 10 cents out of every dollar that they earn. And this is a good place to start. It's easy to give 10 cents out of $1. a little more difficult to give 100,000 out of a million. You say, oh, if I had $1 million, I'd give 100,000. I'm not that sure. We better start you early, right? So that when the big money comes, it'll just be automatic. You won't even have to think about it, okay? All right, so 10 cents for charity and church. Here's the next 10 cents. Active capital. Try to make a profit. It's called buy and sell. I learned to do this starting at age 25. It's how I made my first fortune. Buying and selling. Like the little boy who buys a bottle of soap for $2 and sells it for $3. Active capital means you try to make the profit. Buy a piece of property and improve it and sell it. Active capital. Keep saving up this active capital until you've got some to work with to buy and sell. Make a profit. Now the third 10 cents is passive capital, which means let somebody else use this 10%. You put this to work and see if you can't make a profit. This is to let someone else use it. You are the passive partner in providing the money. They are the active partner in seeing if they can make a profit and pay you dividends and stock increase and whatever. Interest. And that little formula is a good place to start. Now, you might not really be able to start there. I call this the ideal. Maybe by the time you've heard this, you're in such bad financial shape that you have to go here, 97, 1, 1, and 1. That right now you're in a trap. You're caught. And it's going to take you a while to get out. So right now you got to spend 97% of your income, right, for your living and lifestyle because, you know, you're caught. You're obligated. You know, there's no way out. And then the rest of these now are just 1, 1, and 1. The key is to start with something. Now, Mr. Schoaf gave me a comment. It has served me all these years. Here's the comment. It's not the amount that counts. It's the plan that counts. When I first met him, I said, if I had more money, I'd have a better plan. He said, no, if you had a better plan, you'd have more money. So if you have to, you start with 97, 1, 1, and 1. Then what do? Now comes the project right away of trying to get this 97 figure to go down and these other 3 numbers to start going up. This now becomes an exciting game to play. In another seminar, I talk about measuring progress. This is one of the great motivating factors in the world, is to start something and make progress. Start something and make progress. So Jim Rohn told us the ideal was 70, 10, 10, and 10. But I can't start there. I've got to start with 97, 1, 1, and 1. And here's what you've got to understand. This is okay. I mean, if this is where you have to start, that's where you have to start. Then you start driving this number down and start driving these numbers up. And it's a whole game to play till finally you can arrive at this pretty good ideal way what to do with the money you earn from a paycheck or from dividends or from whatever sources. 70, 10, 10, 10. I mentioned the name Sarah Alfaro in Mexico. I taught her this, and she's been teaching it to the people she's responsible for over all the last 10 years. And some of them now are doing extremely well, making big money, and they've got houses and cars and, you know, all kinds of stuff. 70, 10, 10, and 10. Now, when you start getting into the big money, these numbers have to change again. I probably don't spend more than 10% of my income. So if this number for me is 10%, you can imagine what these other 3 numbers probably are. So if you have to, you start here. Get to the ideal. And then when it really starts to flow in your favor, you rearrange this program again, 10%. Because if you're doing big time, you know, you couldn't spend 70% of your income. It would be obscene. Too much. So, just a little formula to follow. Now here's the wrap-up, and I've got to get to a few points on leadership before we finish. Here's the next one now.